still live. Welcome to yet another edition of our PCS Impact Q&A. I'm your host, MJ Joyce. I'm the Director of Community Outreach here at PCS Grades. Woo! Unfortunately, Megan Harless is not with us today. She had a family emergency, so she is going to be out of town. Everybody, we miss you, Megan. We'll get you here, but our resident PCS reform advocate, aka resident, will be back. If not next week, then definitely the following. She will be here soon, but everybody give her props. We miss you, we love you, and we'll see you next time. We have a good show for you today, okay? So we're going to be talking about all things kind of staging and prepping your home for sale when you PCS. And even if you're not selling your home, there's a lot that we can take away today, especially regarding the whole staging aspect of things. Like, I'm all down for that Pinterest-worthy advice to make my walls maybe a little less bare, or, maybe make it a little bit more presentable because, I have a Mill Kid 2.0 at home, and it's very lived in, it's very family oriented, but it's not the staging aspect, and I would love to figure out ways to do that as well. So before we get to that, and before we get to our lovely guest, Susan Brand, I'm going to go ahead and go over those housekeeping items as I do every week. Okay? Ready, set, here we go. All right, folks, we've got answers. And if we don't have those answers, guess what? We know who does. And if we don't know either of those things, we're going to take your questions for action and get back to you with an answer. Speaking of questions, comments, concerns, shout outs, suggestions, go ahead and leave those in the comment section below or to the side, depending on where you're watching from. Yes, because the more you engage and the more you speak, the more other families are going to get notified, the more chances that you might have to win some Hope Design bling. We're going to save them up this week into next as well for when Megan comes back. I don't like to do stuff without her because she's part of my clan, man. What else? Okay, so we've got that. Oh, by the way, we've got the experts like Susan here, who this is not her first rodeo. She's a mill spouse herself, and also, by the way, a realtor who does this for like a living, right? So we've got experts like her, like U.S. Transportation Command, like people from the moving industry, like the International Association of Movers. We've got military spouse employment advocates, and we bring you military-connected education experts, and we bring them to you because they are the source. They will help answer your PCS questions, but sometimes you're going to have a specific situation that is specific to you and your military family. And in those instances, your two forever and always resources will be, number one, your local chain of command. Number two, your local transportation office. Those are the people who know you. Those are the people who are dealing with your stuff. Those are the people who could take your issues and further them for action. Of course, you always have PCS grades at the helm, but you come to our website, you can read and leave reviews on your housing, on your off-base housing, on your on-base housing, on your movers, lenders, schools, and so much more. So head on over to pcsgrades.com when we're done with the webinar, but don't do it yet. Stay tuned in because we got a great show for you today. Okay, last but not least. Now I modify this every week because, like everything, it changes. But we got to keep doing our part, people. We've got to keep that curve flattened. We've got to flatten that curve. With this Delta variant thing coming in, you see different areas are kind of popping up and getting higher. Be vigilant, people. Be vigilant. We were doing so well. So do what you can, whether that's wearing a mask, making sure your movers are wearing their masks, social distancing, whatever it's like in your area. Okay? Because when we flatten that curve, we're going to flatten Murphy with it. You hear us, Murphy? We are coming for you. We're this close. So in lieu of those DOD updates today, unfortunately, because Megan isn't here, we'll get some information to pass, and anything that we do, I'll get with her in the back end. We'll put in the comments section. But in the meantime, I would like to introduce you to Miss Susan Brand, Marine spouse in the house. Hoorah, Yut Kill Semper Fi. We're taking over, people. So Susan, would you mind telling our audience just a little bit about yourself, please?
Semper Fi, that's right. Well, so my name is Susan Brand. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for that introduction. and I hope everybody's doing great out there. And so I've been a realtor for almost 8 years. And prior to that, I actually taught school for a little while. I was a high school teacher. And then prior to that, I did some sales, some corporate sales as well. So currently I'm married to a Marine. He is a Marine reservist, and he only has about a couple of years left. Thank goodness. We're hoping he can hang in there because, as you guys know, it's tough. It's really tough. So, but I was fortunate enough that we got married right at the end of his last PCS. So I didn't really have to experience a lot of what you all have to experience. But fortunately, I have a lot of great friends that are military, and I work with a lot of people that are military. So I understand how difficult it is, the PCS process. And I'm just amazed all the time when I see you people able to do this, and y'all can just jump in there. And I know it's hard. It's a lot of hard work. So thank you for being here today. And thank you for letting me chat with you a little bit. And I'm here to answer any questions you have. And I'm happy to get things going.
Awesome. Awesome. And welcome, of course. Super stoked to have a Semper sister, if you will, in the house. Usually I'm taken over by my army peeps, my fellow peeps.
Yeah, I'll tell you, MJ, so it's interesting because my husband's a Marine, but my dad's in the Army, or retired Army. So as you can imagine, a house divided a little bit there. So I have to remind them that we're all on the same side, So, but you know what I'm talking about. So, but it's all good. So I do. But
here's the thing. And this is something that, because I've got to work, PCSing, we all do that regardless of the branch. So we bleed purple. I bleed purple.
Absolutely.
For sure. Yeah. Okay, so we're just going to kind of dive right into some of these questions. And if you know somebody who's PCSing, whether they're selling their house or not, this is all good information to have, no matter what. So if you know of somebody, or you yourself are, go ahead and tag them in the comments. Okay. Share this with them. If they're not able to, they can catch it on the replay, because this will live on our Facebook page. Yes, it will. And of course, we're going to be keeping in touch with Susan. So if any of our Oconus families are watching after the replay, ask your question, and we'll go ahead and get with Susan to make sure that it gets answered.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
All right, let's kick it off. So when you're preparing to sell a home, okay, families are always told to stage their home. Okay, what exactly does that mean, staging your home, and why is that even important?
Right. That's a great question. And I think to a lot of people that sounds maybe kind of intimidating, like, oh no, what does that mean? In a nutshell, it's just, to put it simply, decluttering. I'll be honest with you. It's a lot of decluttering and a lot of editing. That's the catchphrase that a lot of designers will use, and a lot of my stagers will use. They like for you to edit the home. So basically, you're going to come in and think less is more. So I had one stager tell me once that you literally could remove half of the items from your house, put them in storage, or put them in a garage, and then your home would probably be ready for photos and ready to be staged. So less is more. I have a lot of clients that will say, this looks so boring. And you almost want it to look a little boring. You want everything kind of removed from the counters, and not as many items placed in the, like the bookshelves and things like that. And one reason is because when we're looking at photos online, our eyes get distracted. So if there's too much busyness going on, then it's almost overwhelming for our brain. We want to see maybe a big piece of art on the wall, but not lots of little ones, if that makes sense. So think, almost boring, less is more, and just decluttering. You're going to be moving anyway. So just start packing those things up, putting it in the garage. And people are very forgiving about garages, because everybody knows it's the garage. We all have one, and it's always a mess, right? So
yes, it is. Husband.
Yes. Uh-huh. But another thing to think about and be conscious of is smells. A lot of times, like, I have a little wiener dog. I don't know how she gets so stinky, but sometimes when I come home, I can smell her. So those are things to be sensitive of when you're staging a home, whether it be, lighting some candles, or the little scentsy things, or just putting some air fresheners around. That's part of staging as well. We need to be sensitive to those smells, because our noses get desensitized. So we just want it to be nice and crisp and clean when you come in. And of course, all you guys are military, you know how to clean. I mean, you really do. So there you go. That's one of the biggest things. Absolutely. So.
Well, not only that, I mean, even beyond the cleaning part, we know how to Tetris. We can play Tetris like it's no, like Nintendo built that game for military families. I'm just saying.
That's perfect for all the little knickknacks. You know, you got to place them just right and then take some of them out. And editing and decluttering. Those are the two catchphrases. Remember that.
For sure. Mm-hmm. Okay. So sometimes when we're selling our home, are there certain repairs that just need to be done? So how important is it for these repairs to be done beforehand?
That's a good question. So I always say to my clients, if it's something you're concerned about and that you're thinking about, it's probably something that a potential buyer is thinking about. So for example, you know, I use this with my clients all the time. Think like a buyer, you know? So if you're a buyer and you walk in and you see, you know, a water stain on the wall, what is that going to mean to you? Well, your brain's probably going to start thinking, okay, wait, so there's something really big in here. And you always go to worst case scenario land, right? So it's better to, those types of repairs, definitely get those taken care of. If it's going to, you know, cause some red flags for the buyers, you don't want to hide anything, of course, but let's say you had a roof repair that was done years ago, but maybe you never got around to repairing that little water stain. It's important to repair that water stain because otherwise they're going to be going down worst case scenario road and think that, oh no, this house is falling apart. We got to move on to the next one. And, you know, if you have the time and the resources and the ability to do it before listing, it's always better to do it before, because once that inspection comes back and those repairs are on the inspection, let's say maybe it would have been a quick $50 fix for you before. Once the buyer gets involved, oh, all of a sudden it's going to cost $200, you know, to get somebody out there. So.
Okay. So I'm going to flip flop then, because I had to look at this was like a two-parter. So when it comes to that home inspection, like, would those repairs that are like found needed in a home inspection hold up? Would it like put the kibosh on the selling process? Is it like stop?
No, not necessarily, because the good thing about selling a house is everything's negotiable. So you can negotiate everything, unless, of course, it's something really major that would come back, you know, as far as like a VA loan, because of course we do a lot of VA loans. Absolutely. So if it's something really significant, then yes, that could put the kibosh on something. So if it's a big item, like,
so let's just say hypothetically that it is the roof. Okay. So like, let's say that it's the roof thing. Okay. That the roof needs repair or replacement or whatever. We're going to use the VA scenario because the majority of us are going to be using that. Okay. So if we're using that and there's like, it's the roof, if it's the VA process, is that something they check? Is that something that will put the kibosh on it there?
Absolutely. They would check the roof. So if they see something wrong with the roof, if the roof needs repair, then that's something that would be a conducive condition, and they would need to have that repaired prior to closing. Absolutely. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the sale won't go through, but it could mean an extra expense for the seller, and because the seller would have to take care of that before being able to move forward with the VA loan. And that's just a protection for the VA buyer, for the veteran. So it's a good thing. But, you know, if you're able to take care of anything that you know that really needs to be repaired, just go ahead and bite the bullet if you're able to. You know, I don't want you to go and spend your life savings repairing something. You know, don't do that. But, you know, if it's something you can do, then absolutely. It just makes it smoother, especially in this market. It's a competitive market.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we are definitely going to touch on that in a minute.
Good, absolutely.
Because it's a thing. So, okay, for a lot of first-time sellers, it's their first time having, like, say, an open house, right? Yes. So can you explain what that open house process is for a family and why it's important for them to perhaps not be there?
Okay, well, I'll go back to my catchphrase that I mentioned earlier. Think like a buyer. When in doubt, think like a buyer. If you were a buyer and you're walking through an open house, or a showing for that matter, because basically an open house is pretty much like a showing. Just think of it as a showing with a lot of people. Instead of maybe just a couple, it's you know, quite a few people. If you're a buyer and you're walking through Would you feel more comfortable if the seller were kind of lurking over your shoulder? Or would you feel more comfortable if maybe they weren't there? If maybe they left and went and got some ice cream? So, most people would honestly say, I'd probably feel more comfortable. I can talk to my husband, my wife, my kids, I can be free and talk about what I like and what I don't like without having to hurt anyone's feelings or offend anyone. So it's better. It's better just to leave, let them have that time. I know it's hard to have weird people running through your home, but again, we're selling the home and basically the home is being interviewed. So we have to step away from the process.
That's a good way to look at it. The home is being interviewed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Going back to the staging, it's kind of like when we go on an interview, what do? We fix our hair, we fix our makeup, we, make sure we get, good night's sleep. We put on our best suit, all of that, make sure we're on time. We have our notebook. Same thing when we're staging a home. We want it to look the best. Maybe not the way that we normally look, just because we don't wear our pajamas to interviews. Well, we don't live in our home the way that we sell our home.
So make your bed.
Separate things. Yes, please make your bed. Yes. Put your dirty clothes away. Yep, please. Do the dishes, all that.
Oh my gosh. Thank God I have older kids. I'd be like, get to work.
It's hard.
Get to work, or the next house won't have a room for you. Get to work.
That does bring up something, because I know we probably have lots of moms on here with little ones. So that's a good thing. And I have little ones too. They're in elementary school. So we still have a bunch of stuff around. When you're showing homes, think about, I have some clients that do this. They'll just have a big box. And if they've got toys and stuff, just sweep everything up, stuff it in the box, push it in the garage. And that way you're ready for showings. Because I know the kids leave stuff around everywhere. So yeah, throw it in the garage.
Yeah. And then with it, maybe. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. Yeah, that's another webinar. So
I hear you.
The pandemic, that it's brought so many changes to our world. I mean, just across the board, and it has changed the way that people are viewing and buying and selling their homes. So, I know we already know some of it. I'm going to ask the question, even though a lot of us know the answer. But what are some alternatives being offered to that in-person home, in-home showings?
Well, it's interesting. I think, as you mentioned, of course, everything has changed. I would have never dreamt of doing a Zoom call with my doctor, and I'm sure we've probably all done it now, right? How you always had to go in. That's just the way it was.
I'm just, for that record, I'm just glad that I don't have to get on the scale, because COVID has not been kind to me. Okay, I'm just saying.
I know, that's really one of the best things ever. And they just ask you, and I'm like, oh, I can just give you whatever.
I'm a $110 soaking wet.
And they'll never know. Okay. Anyway, we digress here, but just as we, now go to the doctor on Zoom, we're kind of, things are changing as far as real estate. I think it's becoming more acceptable to have, these virtual showings. And in the past, we wouldn't see a lot of times we would still do it with military, have sight unseen purchases. But I think we're seeing more, even just with your average civilian and not necessarily military. It's becoming more acceptable because we can do so much with our phones now. We can do FaceTime, we can do Skype, we can take great high definition videos. And that's what I'll do for clients. I'll go in and I'll take lots of videos of all the different areas of the home. And then I'll do like a FaceTime with them as well, so that they can have the videos to go back and look. And then we can do the FaceTime. But I think it's becoming more acceptable. Here's an example. When our MLS, our local MLS here in San Antonio, whenever COVID hit, we used to have prior to COVID, we had a limit of 25 photos, which isn't very much, right? Now they expanded it. So we have increased bandwidth there, and we can pretty much put as many photos as we want, because they recognize the importance of being able to get as much information, digitally as we can, since we're not showing in person. So I think we're seeing that become more acceptable.
No, for sure. And just, I moved, first of all, I'm a renter. It's the first time I've ever lived off base, like in my husband's entire 20-year Marine career, right? Paying your first electric bill at 35 years old. I say it all the time. This girl right here. Who does that? I do that. Military families do that. But this was going to be.
Yeah.
So basically, when we came here for our house hunting leave, we didn't have any luck.
Right.
So we actually did end up, because we couldn't make 2 trips, we actually did a walkthrough with our realtor walked through with the iPad, right? Which was good. It was convenient. And guess what? At that time, we didn't have much of a choice. So we went with what we had. And so, you know, many families that are currently buying and selling sight unseen right now. And a lot of people are renting. This also kind of can apply to renting, but yeah. So is there anything like in that particular process, that sight unseen process, okay, of not seeing that home in person, that families should probably like be aware of?
Right. Well, that's why I think it's important to have a good realtor that will spend the time to, take, I actually, ironically, I did a virtual tour yesterday for a client, and we were there for almost an hour, and we went through, every room very closely, and I showed them the walls and I showed them the carpet close up so that they can see, because a lot of times you can't see that in pictures. You can't see that there's lots of scuff marks and scratches on the wall, or maybe that the carpet looks really dirty. But zoom in on those, have your realtor zoom in on those and really take, close pictures of those, because of course you can zoom in big time on your phone, right? So have your realtor do that. And then, take that time. Don't just do a quick, 5 or 10 minute walkthrough. Reserve an hour, because there were times where, we would walk to one room and then she would say, "Oh, I can't remember what that closet looked like. Can you take me back?" Because that's what you would do in a home when you're doing a showing. You walk through and you look, and then you forget, and you walk back and you check out another room. Another thing I would suggest, we talked about smells earlier. That's something that technology will not allow us to, smell something yet, but maybe we'll get there, but what does it smell like? Ask her honestly, I mean, can you smell mold? Can you smell smoke? Because those are things that could impact your decision to move forward, and those are things, intangibles like that. And maybe other intangibles like, what does it feel like as far as the light coming through? Maybe you can't really tell that, but those are things that you really can sense when you're inside a home. So just have a good realtor that will really provide as much detail as possible. Oh, the other thing I was going to add too, MJ, was I always think it's important to take a video of the neighborhood, kind of walk down the street and say, "Okay, here's your neighbors, oh, look, here's some nice people walking their dogs, and then take a picture of, the front entrance to the neighborhood so they can see." I actually took my client, I did a little video of the local HEB, which was just only a few minutes away. HEB is our grocery store, in case people don't know that.
Yes, it is. And I've been there, and people, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So just as much information as you can. Mm-hmm.
And that's really interesting. And I'm just going to kind of like throw in there too. So like, in addition to that, like if you're looking at that particular neighborhood, PCS grades, we also, military and veteran families come to PCS grades, and they leave reviews as well on not just on-base housing, also off-base areas and neighborhoods. So, in some areas we have pictures on our neighborhood on just, here's the street view. Here's, what parking might look like. There's no sidewalks. I did not know this place did not have a sidewalk.
That's a good point. Right.
And I would have loved to have known that. Had I headed over to PCS grades when I moved here, I probably would have had that option. But that's kind of cool too. And we have area guides too. So like you could go on and you can look at, what's the weather like there? What is the traffic, like the commute going to be there? What's the nearest installation, like that kind of thing.
Exactly. Well, and there are so many tools that we have now as realtors. We're really so fortunate because there's reports that we can send out. I send out a report called an RPR report, which kind of talks about what you mentioned. Like it talks about things like the walk. How far is this? Restaurants and bus stops and schools and parks and all of those kind of things that maybe they're important, but you're not going to see from, just a regular showing. So there's a lot of great data out there. Just get a good realtor that will jump in there and give you, as much information as you can handle.
Exactly. And so that's actually too, just to bring this up, this is why it's really great to have like an agent who knows about the military life, like especially if they are also in some way, shape, or form living said military life. bonus, because they're going to not just look at things through the lens of somebody who's purchasing or selling a home. They're going to look at it through the lens of your life. Like,
Right.
we are entrusting these people with the biggest purchase of our lives. And so the more they know about the military community and our challenges, the better. So kudos.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, it's important. Absolutely. And and I've used the VA loan several times. So, it's important. I think also to have someone that understands the VA loan process and all the challenges that go along with that. So that's important. Hmm.
Let's see. I'm just trying to look here really quick. So let's talk about that market.
Oh,
That really crazy, just this is nuts market.
I know. Yeah,
It's nuts. Okay, so
really is. Hmm.
with the tough real estate marketing that's happening right now, we're
Yeah,
seeing some really crazy bids on homes. Like, a lot of times that bid, like, you have to go 30 or 50 over the asking price in some areas, right? And
right.
sometimes people are able to waive inspections. Now, there are some, like in the VA loan, where you can't, but with the state of affairs as they are right now, how are these bids impacting a seller in that process? Now, you think the seller is just like, oh, I've got it made in the shade, but there are some things to think about too. So how are these bids impacting a seller in that process? And is waiving the inspections an okay thing to do?
That's a great question. If you think about it from the seller's perspective, yes, people think, "Oh, yeah, yeah, you're right. You got it made. You're a seller. You can do whatever you want. Just pick from the best offer and make a ton of money, and you're going to be loaded." But you're right. There are some other things to consider from the seller perspective, and I'll tell you one thing that we're seeing a little bit of a trend of. I'm starting to see, and I've talked to other colleagues about this. We're seeing homes maybe come back on the market, and that's one of the worst things you want to happen from the seller's perspective, because you don't want to go under contract and then be back on the market, and that's a difficult thing to do. And I think what's happening is we're getting people that are putting multiple offers in on multiple homes because of the frenzy, and they're like, well, I may not get this one, so let's put an offer over here, and then maybe they do get the other one, and then they have to retract that offer. So we're seeing a little bit of that. So I think one thing from a seller's perspective is just to really have your realtor do some good vetting, and talking to that other buyer's agent, and kind of understanding their situation. Okay, so you're telling me that your buyers are in this situation, they're ready to buy, and and just really get a feel for who this potential buyer is, and making sure that they're solid as far as the financing. And when I'm representing a buyer, I actually or excuse me, a seller, I like to call the lender and talk to them and say, hey, Bob and Sally submitted an offer. I just wanted to talk to you about, I mean, you feel really solid about their situation. Of course, they're not going to give me personal information. That's not what I'm asking for, but I'm just trying to get a feel from the lender, and then also understand, okay, you feel like you can meet this closing date, because the lender is the one that's going to be driving that. So I think it's important, just get a realtor that's going to ask a lot of questions and be really involved. And as far as multiple offers, you also want to have someone that's experienced with having those multiple offers, because just because you get really high offer, that may not be the best offer. So a lot.
That is very true. And before I get to the next one, I've been hearing conflicting reports about, I have friends who have, written, kind of like letters, little essays about themselves or their families or whatever. And sometimes that can play in your favor. But I've been hearing conflicting reports lately that a lot of agents are telling their clients kind of maybe to avoid that, because there have been some maybe some discrimination things. Is that a best practice, or is that moving away from best practices?
That's a great question, and I think you're right on when MJ, when you're talking about that there's been some discussion, and I think we're going to start to see more discussion about that. I know, and I don't know off the top of my head which state, but I believe that there is a state that did outlaw that recently. They made it illegal to write letters. So as of right now, in my state, Texas, we still can do that, and I think a lot of states you still can. So, but I think you can be cautious with it as well, and just, take the advice of your realtor, see what they have to say. But as long as as long as you're not going against any kind of regulation or rule, then it is something. It is a very common practice still. But I think you're right. We might be moving away from that. But I will tell you a really positive story, if I may. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had a buyer, a VA buyer. We were competing against 7 offers. There were 7 offers total. And we got in there. They were only accepting offers for a couple of days. We got in there, got in our offer, had to get it in really quickly. And at the last minute, I just wrote a little blurb about my client and talked about how, they're PCSing from Germany. They're so glad to be back in Texas. They're going to retire here. It's, they're so excited, and just, wanted the seller to know a little bit about their situation. Well, as it turned out, that's what got us the house. The buyer, the seller's agent called, and he said, look, it was between you and one other offer. Y'all's were the highest. We were 73,000 over asking price, by the way, which just blows my mind. But it was that little bit of information, and I don't think that was, I think that, it was just the truth. I was just telling I wanted the seller to know how excited my buyers were to be back in Texas. And so that's what got the deal. So, being a veteran, being in the military, if that will help you, then use it, absolutely. And as it turns out, the sellers were veterans, and we didn't know that. So,
see, we're everywhere.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I think that's great. Like, even my neighbor, just when home prices started to really skyrocket, right before then, he was like the first person in our neighborhood to sell. And he had all these offers. I mean, he put the house up on a Sunday, and then by like Monday, they had like 20 offers or 20, 20 bids or whatever. And before he left, I talked to him, and he's like, you know what? I had this one of the offers was 40,000 over the listing. But there was also a military family that was moving here and could not find anything. Mm-hmm. And he was prior service himself. He's like, and they have kids, and I built this pool for my kids, and I want those kids. So you know what? I didn't care. He's like, I still got more than what I listed it for. Right. Exactly. I'm not going to be greedy because I care about who moves in and experiences all the hard work that I did for my family. And I can't wait for them to, you know what I mean? So sometimes some people know, but that emotional piece does play a part.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. If you've put your heart and soul into this beautiful home, you want someone that is gonna embrace it and enjoy it and love it,
Yep.
That's important. Yeah. And, being military, and that's one reason why I love working with the military, because I want to support those that have, that are serving our country. And I know, my dad's a veteran, my husband's a veteran. So, anytime I can help anybody, that's what it's about. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that a lot of our, if not all, most of our military families, they're going to use that VA home loan to purchase their home. And there's a lot of misconceptions, a lot of myths, and it's very hard. I mean, the VA is arguably one of the biggest agencies that are the hardest to navigate. And so when it comes to the VA home loan, it requires, for our protection, it requires certain, those appraisals, those inspections that conventional home loans can waive, that you can waive with those. So how can a military family make their bid with their VA loan seem enticing or competitive and put them at the top of the list with that seller?
Right. That's a great question. And, it's unfortunate that in this market, and I hate telling my VA buyers this. I tell them, look, it's going to be tough. We're going to be competing against cash offers. There's so much cash out there right now. It's unbelievable. Cash offers, conventional sellers generally go with a cash offer first, and then a conventional, and then they'll look at the VA, unfortunately. So we have to be really creative. So I have gotten, several VA buyers under contract recently, and it's tough. One thing you have to do, and I think, using the information that you have, like the story just then, just telling the sellers the situation of the buyer. And another thing you can do too is be a little bit creative when writing your offer. Maybe offer to have a shorter option period. In Texas, it's called an option period. In other states, I think they call it a due diligence period. That's when you do your inspections. Maybe trimming that down a few days, and then just hustling to get your inspections done really quickly. Another thing you can do is talk to your lender about becoming fully pre-approved and getting your loan to underwriting right away, so that the minute you go under contract, you get that appraisal ordered, and then you can tell the seller, look, we're already approved. It's already in underwriting. We just need a house, basically. Because a lot of times people will buy a house and then they'll start the process. But if you talk to your lender can get things moving quickly. And that, speaking of lenders, that's a really important piece, especially in this competitive market. I encourage my VA buyers. A lot of them use Navy Fed or PenFed or USAA, which, by the way, I've used all of those before to buy a house or refinance, because we've always used VA as well. But I will tell you that if I were competing in a multiple offer situation, I would use one of my local lenders that, I know that I can text and call, and they'll be on the phone calling me back, and I know that they'll be very involved, and get them involved and have them call the listing agent and talk about your credit worthiness and how wonderful you are and how the loan's ready to go. And then if you do have some extra cash, if you're able to put a little bit more towards maybe paying the title policy for the seller, that's a big thing in the old days, meaning like a year ago. That was almost always considered a seller's expense. It's about 0.7% of the loan. So a few $1,000s, but that could make or break a deal. Maybe if you're willing to pay for that, if you have that extra cash, then that'll help close the deal. Yeah.
For sure. And so this kind of goes in line with that. Jared, shout out, Jared. Does the VA still mandate that you cannot pay over the appraisal value?
Yes. Good question, Jared. And I was going to address that. You can actually pay over the appraised value. What you would need to do, you can't put that in the contract. You can't waive the appraisal like you can with a conventional offer. There's a separate, and of course, every state is different. Here in Texas, we have an actual addendum that we attach to the contract, which waives the appraisal. We can't do that with the VA. However, a VA buyer can write a letter to the seller and say, Mr. Seller, I have X amount that I'm able to pay for that appraisal gap. So if the home price is 300 and the appraisal comes in at 300, but maybe the buyer has offered 320, maybe they are able to prove, and they can get proof of funds saying, look, we have $20,000 extra. We're willing to pay that appraisal difference to win this house. Now, I know not all veterans can do that. Of course, that's a lot of money. Absolutely. But if you are able to do that, then that is an option for you. Just talk to your lender about that.
And I think that's kind of where we're at right now. Our military families it's very hard for them to utilize the VA home loan, because yes, we do that. And the only way that we can stay competitive is if we have that money on hand to entice, whether that's paying for, a different inspection, or paying for this, or paying over that asking price. Like, we can pay that, but it's going to come out of our pocket. You know what I mean? And that's very difficult to kind of go through, because it's a huge misnomer when using your VA home loan. You're not required to put anything down. You zero down. Like, that's one of the perks, right? But that doesn't mean that you A, can't, and B, especially in a market like this, that you shouldn't. If you can, but it really, I'm not going to lie. I've never bought a house before. I'm in the process of kind of doing that. I am 41 years old, people, and I'm fine with saying that. And this is the first time I'm going through this process myself. And so it's very intimidating, but then when we see, well, I can't compete with that. You know what I mean? Like, it's very disconcerting. And when we were talking about, like you said, writing the letter, like, some states do, some states don't. Courtney just tuned in. Looks like, hey, Courtney, are you allowed to write a letter to the seller sharing your, sharing information about that you're a military family? Because she always thought that there was not supposed to be any communication at all.
Right. Well, typically there's not any direct communication between the buyer and the seller during the process. And even at closing, some states have joint closings. Here in Texas, we have separate closings. So the buyer and seller, theoretically, usually they don't ever even meet. However, if you're writing a letter and, filtering it through your realtor to their realtor, then that's completely legal. Of course, you'll have to check with your state. But again, I think there's only one state, and I can't remember which one it was. I want to say New Jersey, maybe, but I'm not exactly sure. But as far as I know, it is still legal to do that in the majority of the states, to write a letter and just tell them who you are. And, maybe something resonates with them. I had a client once write a letter because they went through the house and they saw a picture of a Kansas City Chiefs or something flag. Turns out that was their team. So they wrote a letter about how, I can't believe it, you love Kansas City, we love Kansas City, and they got the offer. So, it's crazy. You just never know. So
it's the smallest thing sometimes. I mean, like, I'll tell you what, if somebody runs up to my house saying, oh my gosh, Detroit Lions, I'm going to be like, oh, you are not a fair weather fan. Come on down.
See, that, it could hurt you too, I guess. So you have to make sure you know the situation, right? Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Pick the right team.
Oh, yeah. Which is, changes from year to year, people. It's okay. As military families, we can claim whatever.
Right.
Just saying.
Yeah. But yeah, I see Courtney's question there. So yeah, as long as you're doing it through the appropriate channels, go through your realtor, then that's fine. You should be fine.
Absolutely. Okay, so before we part, what would be your biggest piece of advice for our military families, whether they are buying or selling in this crazy market?
Oh gosh, that's, I would say, take a deep breath, and take a deep breath. It's a tough market out there, but it's also, there's a lot of positives too, especially, if you're on the seller side, it's a great time to sell. If you're on the buyer side, it's a great time to buy too, because the interest rates are so low. And, and also, I always tell my clients too, when they're buying, we're never going to find that 100% perfect house. My clients, even when they're building a house, it's still not 100%. So it's okay, but if you can find a house that's 85-ish% or so, then that's pretty good, and you know what, it'll be your home once you move in there. So it may not be exactly perfect, but what is perfect, right? So
well, in military life, not the only thing that's perfect is Murphy when he's on schedule.
I know that Murphy. Ugh. Oh, the other thing I'll add to MJ is just, and maybe this comes from being my years of being a teacher as well, but I always tell my clients, ask questions. Do not ever feel like there is a silly question. There's not, and a lot of times when I'm talking to my clients, I'm just kind of drilling stuff to them, and I know it's a lot of info. So if you forget something, just call your realtor, ask your realtor and say, I'm so sorry. I know you talked about this. You don't even have to say you're sorry. Just ask the question again. Ask as many questions, be informed, make sure you understand the process, and don't do anything until you feel good about it.
Got you. And this is interesting. Courtney, shout out Courtney. Still an Army wife. What is Murphy? Oh, girl. No. Okay. And first of all, again, no dumb questions. Murphy as in Murphy's Law.
It's good.
Murphy's Law.
Right? That's good, right?
Yes. Whatever can go wrong will go wrong. That is just a thing. Just for an example, my daughter, her, she went to go visit family, and she is also a military spouse recently, as of May, married an airman, right?
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah. And so her and my Mill Kid 2.0 went to Cali to go visit family. And then when they were on their way back, Murphy crawled right up there. Their flight was delayed. They didn't put her stroller off the plane. She had to carry our hefty little 10-month-old Mill Kid 2.0 around the airport for hours. And he was cranky, and they were tired. You know what I mean? So that is, could it go wrong? Yes. Did it go wrong? Uh-huh. And when our service members are deployed, when we are PCSing, when we are executing anything, there's that phenomenon with Murphy's Law is attached to us for some reason. But I like to look at PCS grades as like the anti-Murphy. I like to look at these webinars as like the anti-Murphy's Law, because we're preparing you for the situations that you might be encountering.
Not today, Murphy.
Not today. Everybody hashtag that in some post today. Not today, Murphy.
That's good. I like it.
Okay. Yes, yes, Courtney, I hope to God you never have that intimate connection with Murphy that I do.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is pretty much all we have today. I just want to say thank you so, so much for coming on with us, Susan. You are a rock star. For all our peeps who are watching the replay, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, put them in that comment section. We're going to stay in touch. We are now BFFs now. Okay. So we're going to stay in touch because she's got the answers. And yeah, so thank you so much. And
Call me when you start looking. I'll answer any questions you want. Absolutely.
There you go. There you go. We'll make sure to, is it okay if we drop your link into
Please do. Absolutely. I'm happy to answer any questions. Yeah. Even if you're in another state or something, and I'm happy to, every state's a little bit different because, regulations, but, for the most part, real estate is pretty consistent. So.
Yep. And of course, in the military, life is small. We know people everywhere. It's just the way it is.
Right.
But yeah, so until next week, this too, Shell PCS.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.